The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to this amazing fun webinar with Alexandra Watkins. Alexandra and I were just talking about how we first met this summer at the Barrett Kohler Book Marketing event, and I was telling Alexandra that she's become sort of a legend in our household because I returned from the BK webinar, the BK marketing workshop, and I read Alexandra's book on the plane. Her book, Hello, My Name is Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Stick, which is the basis of today's webinar. And as soon as I got in the van, my daughter picked up the book, grabbed it out of my hands, and she's been reading the book off and on. She's read it several times. And she had an assignment, Alexandra, for a geometry class in which she had to brand a business and create a name, and she was showing me her presentation, which she's giving today at school, and she said, well, I know that my name wouldn't pass Alexandra's test, but my teacher doesn't know about Alexandra's book. The company name she created was something called Exterminate Soufflés, based on Doctor Who. Exterminate, and who can even spell that with E-G-G-S, exterminate. Anyway, not a great name. But at any rate, I'm so thrilled, Alexandra, to have you with me today. I'm calling in from snowy Michigan. It's 24 degrees. How's the weather in San Francisco today?
It's pouring rain, but we need the rain here. I'm just not looking forward to driving on the freeway later. Californians don't know how to drive when it rains, and thank God it doesn't snow here.
Well, we would love to know where you're calling in from and what the weather's like there. And also, we'd love to have you get acquainted with the GoToWebinar technology. So if you can find the question panel and say hello and tell us where you're calling in from, we'd love to hear. Someone's calling in from Seattle, Alexandra. And while you're telling us where you're calling in from, I just want to introduce Alexandra a bit more. As I mentioned, she is the author of the wonderful and best-selling book, Hello, My Name is Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Stick. She's also the founder of Eat My Words, and they're a naming firm specializing in creating names that make people smile instead of scratch their heads. And Alexandra will be telling us more about that later. Some of her clients include Disney, Microsoft, Wrigley, Frito-Lay, and Fujitsu, and I can barely say that name. Looks like we have some callers from Germany, some from California, Colorado, Arizona, New Jersey. We're really glad to have all of you with us today. Just a few housekeeping notes. We are using Twitter. If you want to share your thoughts via Twitter, please use the hashtag #StickyNames. Also, I will be monitoring the question panel throughout the event, and toward the end of the event, we will have a chance for me to share some of your questions with Alexandra, so you can learn from her today. So, Alexandra, I think we are ready to begin.
Super. Uh-oh. Hi, everyone. Nice to have so many of you on the call today. I saw over 200 people had signed up, which is exciting. I have a lot to cover. This is going to be a very fun and entertaining 45 minutes with a chance to ask me questions at the end. So let's get started. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Or I guess I'm going to talk about it because you're all on mute. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a namer. We're going to talk about why most names are pretty problematic and what you can do about that. I'll share some best practices that you can use and take back to your own company and share. Also, I'm going to give you some of my best brainstorming secrets. And finally, we're going to talk about domain names and getting around the difficulty of finding one that's available. So a little background on me in a nutshell. I started my career as an advertising copywriter at Ogilvy and Mather. Every once in a while, I would get thrown a bone and get to name something. And I love naming, but I had no idea that naming was actually a profession until around 2002. Well, when I figured that out, I completely switched gears and decided I needed to be a namer, not a copywriter. And I discovered that the place to make a name for myself was a very large branding firm, global branding firm called Landor & Associates. And luckily for me, they're right in my own backyard. For 2 years, I tried everything I could to get into Landor. I even sent photos of my dog and all the names I came up with for my dog, but that didn't even help. So I finally did get into Landor. Believe it or not, it was through a Match.com date. That's a whole other webinar. And the entire experience was rated G. It's a fun story, and I'd love to tell you sometime, but we don't have time today. So I worked a lot for Landor as a freelance namer, and I started working for a lot of big branding firms and naming firms as a freelancer. But what was happening is they were putting their good names on my great names. So, for instance, if you've ever eaten a Baconator, you have literally eaten my words because I named it. But because I named it for strategic name development, I can never take credit for it on my own website. So what I needed to do at that point was just open my own naming firm and stop just being a freelancer working for everybody else. So that's when Eat My Words was born, and 10 years later I had become enough of an expert that I was asked to write a book, which just came out 2 months ago. So just so you know who you're talking to, here I am. Obviously, I'm not wearing that dress today. That's our pink fridge in the office where we keep our coolest books. And for any of you who have ever met me and got my business card, you know it's a little mini pink fridge, and that's what it's based on, the pink fridge in our office. I want to show you where I'm sitting just so you can kind of pick, so you know I'm not in my pajamas in bed. This is my desk. It's a 1950s diner booth. So just imagine me behind the computer. This is my view right now in our office. We're in the South of Market neighborhood in Soma. We're a stone's throw from Pinterest, Zynga, Airbnb, and Adobe. This is our famous stuffed animal sofa, and finally our gnome and mascot nomenclature. So Eat My Words has been around since 2005. We only do two things here. We specialize in names and taglines. I can certainly refer people to great identity designers and web designers, trademark attorneys, but we just really do the two things that we love the most. I also do workshops where I teach corporations how to do names themselves. Everything we do is unexpected and fun. Our parking space here, if you come visit, has a little pink fridge sign above it that says, "Eat My Words, client parking only. Violators will be eaten." And finally, we started out working with small fish. Now we mainly work with big fish. Here's some of our clients. And not all of our clients are conventional clients. Right now, we are naming cannabis, which is kind of funny because I don't smoke weed. I think a couple people on my team might, but they don't want to tell me. And the client doesn't smoke weed either, so it's a little bit of the blind leading the blind, but it sure is fun. And I'll just quickly show you a couple names we've come up with. Nito, the robotic vacuum. LiveHive is a real-time customer engagement platform. Alert Gum from Wrigley's has caffeine in it, a lot of caffeine. Smitten Ice Cream is made with liquid nitrogen. They are opening their 5th location here in the Bay Area. Boxbee is an urban storage company. They come to your house, give you empty boxes, you fill them up. They take them, and then they take them away and store them in their hive. It's a great service. Retriever, a GPS for dogs. Argyle Data is a big data company, and we chose the name Argyle because big data is all about finding patterns, and it's all about finding the diamonds in the data, so that's what they do, and Argyle being a diamond pattern. Backbeat are headphones from Plantronics. Gringo Lingo is a language school in Cali, Colombia, and everybody's favorite name is a nail salon in San Francisco's Castro district called Handjob. All right. So that's enough about us. Now let's talk about why most names suck. Now, looking at the names of people that registered, I can already tell a lot of you have names that are hard for people to spell, right? What about names that are hard for people to pronounce? I definitely can't pronounce some of your names. And I know, you know what that's like when people butcher your name. It's annoying. And also, a lot of us have names that people just blank on, right? They can't remember, was it John or Joe or Susie or Sarah? So a lot of companies have the same problem, but they can't blame their parents. They can only blame themselves. These are what I call head scratchers. So anytime you have to help somebody spell your name, pronounce your name, or understand what your name means, you're essentially apologizing for it. And when you're apologizing for your name, you're devaluing your brand. Okay? And we'll talk more about all of these problematic things later and how to avoid them. So my philosophy is simple. A name should make you smile instead of scratch your head. Makes sense, right? Well, I've created a 12-point name evaluation test based on this philosophy. It's called the Smile and Scratch Test, and it's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Inc., San Francisco Business Times, and it's the basis of my book. So we're going to go through that today. SMILE is an acronym for the 5 qualities that make a name great, or I should say awesome. And by the way, we're going to break these down all one by one, but just for a quick overview, the S in SMILE stands for suggestive, then we have meaningful, imagery, legs, and makes an emotional connection. So let's dive in and look at all of those more closely. So the S in SMILE, again, stands for suggestive. So you want a name that suggests something about what your brand or product is or does. Don't make people guess. Just give them a little bit of a hint. Here's one that a lot of people like, Nest, right? So they control this was when they had their thermometer. I know they control a lot more things in your home now, but a home is your nest. So that nest suggests your home, a warm, cozy place. Next, the M in SMILE is for meaningful, and you want to make sure that your name is meaningful to your customers and not just to you. If any of you ride a bike, and I'm sure some of you do, and if any of you live in the city and are in danger of having your bike stolen, this is a name that I'm sure is very meaningful to you. Kryptonite, right, the bike lock company. This particular one is called the New York lock, which is even more meaningful, right? So Kryptonite, it repels thieves, and New York lock, wow, if it can survive the bike thieves in New York, it can survive anywhere. So that's a name that's deeply meaningful to the customer. So know your customer. The I in SMILE stands for imagery. People remember pictures much more easily than they remember words and random letters, right? So we can visualize things in our head. That makes it easier to recall later. Here's a name that's loaded with visual imagery. I'm going to show it to you first in black and white. Okay, Timberland, the great outdoors company, right? This is what I think of when I hear that name or see that name. Even in black and white, this is what I picture. So, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. So think about your name when you're creating it. Can people picture something in their mind? Is it easy for them to remember? And can they picture something good as opposed to something bad? Okay, the L in SMILE stands for legs. And legs simply means that your name is extendable and lends itself to a theme. So, for instance, at Eat My Words, I told you about our parking space sign. Our blog is called The Kitchen Sink. We have a package called The Whole Enchilada. We have one called Snack. So that's a theme. Here's a name that we did that has really long legs. The Church of Cupcakes. Religion, lots of wordplay there. So their tagline, Worshippers Welcome. This is in Denver. Here's some of the cupcake flavors we did for them. And a couple t-shirts. So they're having a lot of fun with their name. The woman that runs a Church of Cupcakes gave herself the title of Church Lady. And she wants to do classes on Sunday called Sunday School. She sells her wares, you know, the t-shirts and such, in the church bazaar. So she has a lot of fun. So you really want a name that lends itself to a theme and you can go places with it. And finally, the E in SMILE stands for emotional. 50% of purchase decisions are based on emotion. Have you ever bought a bottle of wine just because you love the label or you love the name? I definitely know I have. There's a wine name that I love, Ghost Pines. It's just the most mysterious, kind of sexy name for wine, and I bought that wine just because I like the name. And unless all of you are reading Wine Spectator, I'm sure that you've done the same thing. So that's the power of a name with an emotional connection. Here is some examples of names that made no emotional connection. Okay, this was for the Hotel Vitale, which is a very nice kind of hipster hotel here in San Francisco. They wanted to get more wedding business. They have a beautiful venue for weddings, but their services that they were selling along with the wedding just had some very plain descriptive names. So they asked us to come up with things that would make more of an emotional connection. And here's how we did it. So for the rehearsal dinner, meet the parents, right? Post-wedding brunch, Bloody Mary, and the post-reception bar rental, last call for alcohol. So all we did was take some names and change them, and just because of the name change, the sales for these went up by 25%. It's really hard to quantify a name affecting sales because oftentimes there's other branding involved, maybe a new ad campaign, some PR behind it. But in this case, all we did was change the words in their menu of services. It would be like a restaurant changing a menu item from chicken soup to grandma's chicken soup. See how the latter makes more of an emotional connection? So that's a good way to test a name, is to change it just change the wording somewhere and see how people react. Alrighty, so now let's get into Scratch. So Scratch is the acronym for the 7 deadly sins, and Scratch is a reminder, if it makes you scratch your head, scratch it off the list. So the S, I'll just go through these really quickly so you can see. Spelling challenge, copycat, restrictive, annoying, tame, cursive knowledge, and hard to pronounce. So let's dive into those. Spelling challenge. This is a big one, and when I showed you the slide of head scratchers, I think you saw a lot of those. If your name looks like a typo, it's a mistake. If you say your name to Siri and she doesn't know how to spell it, it's a mistake. If your name gets flagged in spell check, if you're sending an email or writing a Word doc and it's getting flagged, I would seriously reconsider it. Unless it's a cool made-up name like Groupon or Munchery, those get a pass because they're new invented words that are cool words. But for the most part, spelling challenge names are difficult. Anytime you have to spell your name for someone, again, you're apologizing for it. Here's a severely spelling challenge name, Species. Right. Now, if you worked at Species, oh, by the way, it's an organic baby clothing company that's no longer in business. If you have to spell your name, if you said, oh, email me, I'm alexandra@species.com, and you'd have to spell it, S-P-E-E-S-E-E-S, then someone would say, why did you spell it that way? What? Why did you spell it that way? Then you have to explain it, right? And again, you're apologizing. By the way, Species, when they were alive, on their website, explained the spelling of their name by saying, Species is spelled that way because that's how babies would spell it if babies could spell. Yep, they're no longer in business. Next, this first C in Scratch stands for copycat. Here's the latest copycat trend, adding an ly at the end of a name to make a new name. These are all, they just don't sound like real words, right? Resultly. That's not even, it's not an adverb. So these are all odd. So people, it was started by Bitly, right? Which Bitly doesn't bother me. It's kind of cute. But these are all copycats with the ly. By the way, you see with Findly, with the dot in the middle, a lot of companies are using the .ly. I don't know how many of you know what .ly is. It's the country code for Libya. Now, I have been to Libya, and even I didn't know that. So I would advise people, be careful with these obscure domain extensions. Okay, next, the R in Scratch stands for restrictive, and that simply means that you've outgrown your name. Now, if any of you are Canadian or have spent any time in Canada, you know what Canadian Tire is. But for those of us who haven't spent a lot of time there, we might not know this, but in Canada, 9 out of 10 Canadians shop at Canadian Tire once a week. Now, it's not that the roads are really bad in Canada or that the tires are really bad. It's that Canadian Tire sells way more than tires. They sell toasters, teddy bears, toys, tools, trampolines, tents, trees, tropical plants, telescopes, and a whole lot of other things. And that was just the tease, right? So they're kind of, I think, like the Sears of Canada is how I've heard them described by my Canadian creative director, Gina. So they clearly outgrew their name, right? So, but I know what you're thinking. Well, you know, 9 out of 10 people in Canada shop there every week. They know what it is. Okay, fair enough. But what if Canadian Tire wanted to roll into the U.S.? They'd have to spend a whole lot of money on an ad campaign telling people that Canadian Tire was way more than tires. And in fact, that was their tagline back in the 80s. So when you're naming your company, product, brand, look into your crystal ball and see as far as you can into the future and make sure that your name is a wide enough umbrella and it scales to fit any future service, product, service, or brand that might fall under it. Okay. Oops. The A in Scratch stands for annoying. Annoying names are when people try to get a little too cute or clever. Oftentimes they're when people force a name by forcing 2 words together. Here's one that I find particularly annoying. Femfessionals. It's a women's network. It just doesn't work. Now Groupon and Munchery I mentioned earlier, those names work because they sound like real words. You know how to spell them when you hear them, and they're not forced. Groupon, Munchery, they roll off the tongue, but Femfessionals, it tries too hard. And I don't know about you, but I would be embarrassed to have, as a woman, I would be embarrassed to have a name like that on my resume. It's just very silly. And I wonder how many members, potential members, they turn off because of their name. The T in Scratch stands for tame. You don't want your name to be tame. Your name needs to stand out and shout in a sea of sameness, right? It's not enough. You cannot be shy. It's not enough just to have a name and hope people notice you. You have to help them notice you. The next name combines 2 of the most boring words in the English language into one super tame name, right? Network Solutions. I mean, really, could you be any more boring? Now, this is a domain seller. I buy all my domains on GoDaddy. I can't explain why I love GoDaddy. It doesn't exactly pass the Smiley and Scratch test, but I think I just love to say it, and it's fun to say. It's super high energy. But Network Solutions, it's a snore, right? So don't be tame. The second C in Scratch stands for cursive Marifa, and I know that you all know what Marifa is, right? No? Marifa means knowledge in Arabic. How would you know that? Well, the cursive knowledge is when people, it's either a foreign word or it's foreign to somebody, or it's such an insider thing to know that you might get it internally at your company, but your customers are clueless about what it is. This one's a real doozy. You know, people don't know how to pronounce it. When they do figure it out, it's Zobni. If I just said Zobni to you and you weren't looking at this, there's 6 different ways to spell Zobni with a Z, with Z-O-B, N-E-E, many different ways. So it's got some issues, spelling challenge, cursive knowledge, hard to pronounce. So what is Zobni, you ask? What is it that they know internally that we don't? Zobni is inbox spelled backwards, but we would never know that. Now they could have put box in one color and in another color to help us out a little bit, but you have to remember your name always needs to be able to appear in black and white because, it will be in the press hopefully, and you want people to be able to pronounce it without anything to help aid them. So finally, the H in Scratch stands for hard to pronounce, like we were just talking about with Zobni. I was driving down Folsom Street here in San Francisco the other day and passed a building with this sign on it. Now, someone the other day told me that that's an umlaut over a U, but I don't think it is. I think it's KIIP. I have no idea how to pronounce it. You know, just imagine, nobody wants to embarrass themselves trying to pronounce a name, right? Which is why I'm not trying to pronounce it, because I don't know, and I don't know anything about what they do. It doesn't say anything. It's very mysterious, so it's a troublesome name. I would definitely scratch that one. You know, that's a case clearly of somebody really wanting to get a 4-letter domain name and thinking that was more important than having a short name. And I'll just quickly tell you, having a short name that's meaningless to your customers is not as good as having a long name that people can remember, right? So it's better to have a name people can remember. It doesn't matter how long it is. There's a consignment furniture store here in San Francisco called Previously Owned by a Gay Man. Previously Owned by a Gay Man. I saw that name once. I read about it in the paper. I never forgot it. I love it so much. I wrote about it in my book. I've met the owner, and she says they get so much mileage out of that name, and it communicates so much about the furnishings, right? They're going to be well taken care of, very stylish, and it makes people smile. So they get a lot of attention for their name, even though it's a mile long. Versus this one, it doesn't spark, it's a head scratcher, right? Alrighty, so now that you know Smile and Scratch, so you know how to evaluate names, and by the way, the Smile and Scratch test, it's on our website, eatmywords.com. If you scroll to the bottom of the homepage and you see where it says, does your name suck? That will take you right to the Smile and Scratch test. So now let's do a cold case, which is, I'm going to show you how we came up with a name, and when I show you that, you're going to learn my brainstorming techniques along the way. So this was a real client. It was a frozen yogurt store. They were calling themselves Zen Yo, right? One of those bad mashups, Zen plus Yo. They were kind of a knockoff of Pinkberry a little bit. They were super trendy. The yogurt, and this is back when frozen yogurt had the big revival. I'm old enough to remember when frozen yogurt came around the first time, but then it was revived. Okay, so they had to, tell people, the teenagers, low calorie. They only had 2 flavors, tart and green tea, both, pretty polarizing, right? And then they were in Utah, right? Which, could be a barrier for some. Target audience, hormonal teenagers. They're the same where, all across the country, and, we know plenty of people in Utah now, and they're very cool people. I think that they have a reputation for being super conservative as Mormons, but the young kids there, just super cool. Okay, so this is you want to write down some brand experiences you want people to have when they come in contact with your brand. So in this case, our client said, hey, we want people to think that this is a cool place, it's a fun place to hang out after school or on the weekends, and we want the name to be so good that people want to wear it on a t-shirt. And that's magic. If someone will pay you to advertise your brand for you, like, here, let me shell out $15 for a t-shirt, and I'm going to wear your name and advertise your brand for you for free. I mean, that's so counterintuitive. We're used to paying for advertising, not people paying us to advertise our brand for us. Unless you're Nike or Louis Vuitton, and those brands didn't happen overnight, but if you have a super cool name, people want to wear it on a t-shirt and pay you. So that's a great way to make extra money, just monetize your name. Write down a few adjectives. What's your brand personality? These guys were all about being fun and playful and super social. This client had one mandate. The name should not have a color, fruit, or the word berry in it. And we were kind of insulted that they said this because, we know, all right, they didn't want us to rip off Pinkberry. Well, what I didn't know at the time, and I later discovered, is a lot of people had already done that. Pinkberry is the second one down on the right, so that's the original, and you can see all of these copycats. And these are just copycats with the word berry in them. So you don't want to be a copycat. You open yourself up to trademark infringement. And also, you know, people know, oh, they're trying to copy Pinkberry, right? And Pinkberry isn't even a great name. It's okay. I don't see a guy wanting to wear a T-shirt that says Pinkberry, but it's definitely not one that I would want to copy, but clearly other people did. All right, so now is the fun part, the creative process. And there's all kinds of tools to stimulate your creativity. Most people brainstorm by sitting in a white conference room, staring at a whiteboard, and hoping that colorful ideas materialize out of thin air. That's a terrible way to brainstorm. There's no creative stimulation. You've seen my office, you know there's stimulation here, all, you know, floor to ceiling color, but that's not where ideas come from, okay? There's way better brainstorming tools than sitting around with a group of people in a room. These are not those tools, so it does not involve any illegal substances, Ouija boards, or drunken Scrabble. And I do think drunken Scrabble is how a lot of names happen. By the way, if you Google drunken Scrabble video, there's a fun video that we made with a company called Luza about how they came up with their name and a little bit about drunken Scrabble. So the best brainstorming tools, believe it or not, are right in front of you on the internet. The internet is a gold mine of ideas, and I'm going to take you through some of my favorite places to look for names. So it has to be fun, right? I think a lot of people, when I tell them what I do, I name things like, oh, that's so hard. And I am always surprised. It's so much fun. So change your mindset. Think of naming as fun and of being on a treasure hunt on the internet, okay? So think of you're looking for gold in the online gold mine. So the first thing you want to do before you start digging around is do some word association with your product. These aren't names for your product, just what are some things that your product conjures up. So I wrote down a couple of words here. You can write down a few dozen if you want. So we're just going to start today. I'm just going to show you ideating around one word, cold. The first place we go is not a place that you would probably think to go, but it's the dictionary. Now I know what you're thinking. The dictionary, I know what cold means. Well, of course, we all know what it's like to be cold. I think Becky is probably pretty freezing cold right now, as some of you are too, with all that snow. But when you go look up a word online in a dictionary, all kinds of things pop out at you. By the way, this page at thefreedictionary.com is a mile long. And I'm just have highlighted cold logic here. That's a phrase that it picked up. You can also see that there's acronyms and idioms here. So those are other good places, or idioms is a great place to look for phrases that might have your name in it. So start at the free dictionary. It's really a cold mine, you could say. All right, next go to a thesaurus. People don't do this enough. Look at all these great words. Okay, Siberian, right? Siberian isn't a great name, but Siberia is a fantastic name because to a lot of people, Utah is Siberia. And they're very self-deprecating there, and this is a name that they would find really playful and fun. And what kid wouldn't want to say, Mom, I'm going to Siberia? Bitter, they have tart yogurt, right? And it's kind of another one of those kind of edgy, hip, self-deprecating names. Frigid, very self-deprecating and fun. Goosebumps, I never would have thought of Goosebumps sitting in a white room staring at a whiteboard. But Goosebumps is really fun because you get, you know, you're chilly, you get goosebumps, and then, you know, raging hormones, goosebumps. And I see polar. Polar isn't a good name, but I remembered that those two flavors are polarizing. So polarized, that could be a good name. So even if it's not the name, write these down because you're going to come back to them later and come up with more. Those are just, some of these might make great names, some might just be sparks of ideas. So next, what I do is I go what I call this Google storming, and I'm just randomly typing things into Google. So I type in things that are cold because I grew up in Southern California, I live in Northern California. I don't have a lot of experience with things that are cold. So I immediately see pictures, oh, Antarctica. Antarctica is kind of like Siberia, that would be a fun name. Then I decide I'm going to look at some images. Now, a picture says 1,000 words. What better place to get ideas for names Then looking at pictures. So I go to Google Images and I type in winter sports. The first store is opening in Salt Lake City. I know that's a haven for winter sports. So I see, oh, you know, skiing, snowboarding. I don't know anything about snowboarding, so I decide I want to learn and I want to look for some names. The best place to find names that people just don't ever really think of is to look up glossaries of terms. Okay, so I'm going to look up some snowboarder terms. So I go to a glossary of lingo. I just am Googling, you know, I've Googled this, and I see Shred in the Gnar 101. I've clicked on it, and I see this word chatter, which is, you know, a term for, you know, when the board shakes because of the rough terrain. Usually occurs when riding on an edge. Okay, you know, there's nothing super special about it, but it's cool that it's a snowboarding term. It's a term when you're cold, your teeth chatter, and it plays into that socialness of the kids chattering with each other. I never would have come up with this name unless I was digging around in glossaries of terms. You can also look up jargon, lingo. There's many different ways to look up the same thing. But there's all kinds of dictionaries for all kinds of things. If you're naming something fast, for instance, what's a metaphor for fast? Performance racing. So do auto racing glossary. And you're going to get all these terms that just normally you wouldn't think of. So that's a good trick. iTunes. People never go here either. You want to make sure that the song isn't trademarked. Most songs aren't trademarked, although I'd stay away from any song that's really famous. I see Cold Hearted. That could be fun too. Not every name is going to be the perfect name. 96, Funky Cold Medina. Not so much. For those of us over a certain age, we remember that song. But, maybe it would have been a good name 20 years ago, but now not so much. And also chill is a word I stayed away from just because, even in Utah that name is passé. So we've only spent a little bit of time online exploring just one word, cold, and look at all these names we already have. Oh, plus Siberia, I forgot to put Siberia on there. Coldplay I got from iTunes. Cold Fury, I think that was on the dictionary thing. So there's Siberia. So there's all kinds of ideas. And have you had to sit in a brainstorming meeting? No, you've just sat at your desk or you've looked at your phone. So really consider the next time you're brainstorming names. And what you don't want to do is start at a domain name website looking for domain names. And we're going to talk about that later. But just dive in. Start poking around sites, the pictures, the word sites, and you're going to get a lot of ideas. Alrighty, so then you got to go back and do it again. So pick another name off the list. And how I came up with the name that the client chose is I was doing a Google image search for eat, and I Google image search the phrase eat frozen yogurt, and I saw all these spoons, and it just popped into my head, Spoon Me. So Spoon Me became the name, and that was one of those ones, when I came up with it, I knew that was the name. It was just far and above the most playful and fun. And our client thought it might be a little controversial, which they liked, but everybody actually in Utah liked the name because even the older Mormon couples thought it was really cute because, spooning is really sweet, right? But you got to be careful, though, because spooning leads to forking. So when you go to a Spoon Me store, you're already in love with the brand before you've even gone inside. When they open a new store, instead of saying coming soon, the sign says spooning soon. When you get to the front door, in Utah, their stores' spooning hours are, say, no spooning on Sundays, and no shirt, no shoes, no spoon. So you haven't even tasted it yet, and you already love the brand. Wouldn't you love a name like that where people love your brand and are talking about it even though they haven't even tried it? That's the power of a really great name. So Spoon Me's kind of been a phenomenon there. They host rock bands. The teens love it. There's now even some in California, and I think they're in a couple different states and even in Canada. They have really monetized their name. Shut Up and Spoon Me is a t-shirt we created for them. And they have booty shorts and all kinds of bumper stickers and merchandise that you can buy. So they're really monetizing that name. And, of course, they have an app. So this is what I call the power of love at first sight names, right? And I was giving a presentation 2 weekends ago. My publisher, Barrett Kohler, had a retreat for the authors, and one of the authors told me that he and his wife had their first date at Spoon Me. So I thought that was so cool. Alrighty, so now let's talk about domain names. A lot of you are suffering for no reason at all, and I'm going to put this all in perspective for you, and I think everyone can take a deep breath and just, release the pain. So here we go. Let's say tomorrow a man appears at your door with a big fat briefcase full of $100 bills wrapped in bacon. Okay, maybe you sold your startup, maybe you won the lottery, maybe a long-lost relative in Nigeria has contacted you and finally given you that money they promised you on the internet. Okay, so what's the first thing you're going to do? Buy a Tesla. All right, now, where do you go to buy a Tesla? I don't know. I'll just go to Tesla.com. What? Tesla.com. This domain name has been registered with GandhiNet. What? What are you going to do? Are you just going to say, forget it, I don't want a Tesla? Are you going to say, no, too much work to find them? No, you're going to go to Google, type in a phrase, Tesla car. Oh, there it is. And here you are. That took all of 4 seconds, right? That's what we do now. If we can't find something the first time, we go to Google and Google finds it for us. If Tesla, now let me ask you a couple more questions. Are you not going to do business with this company because they don't own Tesla.com? Of course not. Do you not trust them? Are they fly-by-night? No. If Tesla doesn't need to own the domain name, Tesla.com, you don't need to own your domain name. By the way, they're Tesla Motors, and by having, not that Tesla needs any advertising, that's a well-known brand, but by adding that secondary word, like if we're eatmywords.com, but if we were Eat My Words naming or Eat My Words branding, that little modifier word there, that actually helps with search engine optimization, also known as SEO. So think about that. Your name by having an extra word in it as your domain name can actually help you. All right, here are 3 famous brands that started with a modifier for their name, right? All of these companies had over 100,000 users before they dropped their modifier and purchased the pure domain name. So don't let the fact that you can't get the pure domain name prevent you from having an awesome name. Better to just add a word to it. I saw a good one the other day. I was walking up the street and I saw a place called, I think it was called Hive, and it said, "This is Hive." Okay, so they didn't have hive.com, but it was "This is Hive." So this is a good one. If you buy my book, there's a whole list of domain modifiers that you can use. One that I really love is hello. So, helloeatmywords.com would be nice. It's friendly. You can also be more creative, and these are the ones I really like, when companies have a phrase. I love peanutbutter.com. I saw that at the Fancy Food Show. I've never forgotten it. The same wavelength, this company couldn't get wavelength.com, so they just made it the same wavelength, which is a familiar phrase. And Watermark is an organization for professional women that we named, and they got the domain name We Are Watermark. The same wavelength and Watermark are both, or Wavelength and Watermark are both organizations that are membership organizations. Both of those names make members feel good, right? I love We Are Watermark. It's very empowering. And the same wavelength, that's telling the people that belong to it, like, hey, we're all on the same page. So consider a phrase. They're so much easier to remember, and it's almost like having a tagline as your domain name. And a phrase can definitely reinforce the brand. And I'll tell you about I Love Peanut Butter. At the Fancy Food Show, there's 14 peanut butter booths at least, and I go to every single one of them and I try their peanut butter. Which one did I remember? I didn't remember all the names, but I remember that domain name, which was on a giant banner, and now I know it's Peanut Butter & Co. And even Peanut Butter & Co., if you type in the website Peanut Butter & Co., redirects to I Love Peanut Butter. So if you can get something like that, that would be fantastic. Alrighty, so lastly, I want to just tell you to be aware of what are called swirls. Now, these aren't particular good names, but I would just want to illustrate a point. While these names look, perfectly innocent the way they are, when you mush them into a domain name, they spell completely different things. Okay, I heard that therapist is being retired as a word in the industry because anytime you put it in a domain name, it says the rapist, right? Can you imagine? Penis land, obviously, no parent wants to drop their kid off at molestation nursery. There's a website called Swirls. There's a Twitter account for Swirls. So you can, but you always want to make sure that your name doesn't spell something untoward. Also, quick tip, if your product or service or brand is targeted at teenagers, do a search on the Urban Dictionary and make sure it doesn't mean anything naughty, I guess you could say. Urban Dictionary is the bane of every namer's existence. We've had some fantastic names killed by it, so it's just an unfortunate reality. So in closing, just want to recap. If the name makes you smile, go for it. If it makes you scratch your head, scratch it off the list. You can do it yourself online with all of those free brainstorming tools I gave you. Domain names don't matter nearly as much as you think they do. Create a clever phrase or add a modifier word. And finally, beware of swirls. All righty. Thank you, everyone.
So fun. Alexandra, I've been sitting over here giggling, and I imagine everybody else has been laughing as well. We want to open it up for questions now and let you have a chance to learn from and with Alexandra today. A couple of notes that have come in on the comments that I want to share with you. We have a caller from Canada who mentioned that Canadian Tire also owns Mark's Works Warehouse, which is clothing, and that they sell that in the store too. So just a insider view on Canadian Tire.
Cool.
So yeah, we have a lot of comments from people who have really enjoyed the slides, including someone who I bet might be your friend, Mark Engel, is telling how much he loves your slides. Yeah. So thank you, Mark.
I love Mark Engel.
Sure. So just want to encourage everyone to go ahead and post your questions. And I have a question already ready for you, Alexandra. I was wondering if you could talk for a few minutes about the danger of naming your company with the name that is already used by someone else, and what your view is on that. I see this a lot with, organizations or churches where they'll have the same name. So what can you tell us what you think about that?
Sure. Well, the number one thing is you open yourself up for trademark infringement if you're in the same category. So, but how you have to think of it is you don't want to spend all that money to invest in a name, and then a year later you're going to get a letter ask a cease and desist letter, and you're going to have to start all over again. It's expensive and it's super embarrassing too. Using somebody else's name, it reeks of being a copycat. Now, it's one thing if you use a name if you're not in the same business. Delta Faucets, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, United Van Lines, two different, they both are trademarked. Dove Soap, Dove Bar, Magnum Ice Cream, Magnum Condoms, right? There's no consumer confusion there. It all comes down to confusion. So definitely do a thorough trademark search before you dive into definitely do one before you buy a domain name for more than $9.95. We had a client spend $45,000 buying a domain name, and then later did the trademark search and found out he couldn't use it.
That would hurt.
Yeah, so I have a great trademark attorney referral if you'd like it. Give me or don't call me, email me. I'll send you his information. His name's Ben. And yeah, I just encourage everybody, really due diligence here. A third of the business, we get it, eat my words, is from people being threatened with trademark infringement.
Wow. So they come to you because they need to come up with a new name.
Yep, in a hurry.
No kidding. Okay.
And I'll tell you, they're never happy. They cannot stand to give up the name that they love. It's really, really hard for people. It's like being forced to divorce the love of your life.
Yeah, I get that. I'm really well connected to my company's name, and if I had to change it, I wouldn't be happy either. Okay, so we have a ton of questions, and I'm going to start with this one from Lindsay. She's wondering if you can share your thoughts on names that include personal names.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the only time, if I was alexandrawatkins.com, for instance, which I was for a long time as a freelance copywriter, that name doesn't say anything about me, and most people's personal names don't say anything about them at all. If your name lends itself to wordplay, I met a consultant once named Stephen Lord, and his company was called Lord Knows. I love that. There's a copywriter named Rich Vanell, and his company is called Get Rich Quick. So if you can use your name in a clever way, go for it. Otherwise, your name doesn't communicate anything about what your brand is. Your current clients and your friends and family, they know what your name stands for, but you don't. And I'll give you an example of a woman. We named her. She was an interior designer and home stager, and her name was Tejal Topawala. And her name's hard for people to pronounce. She lives in Toronto, and she knew that she needed to brand her company with a name because her name was it was unapproachable for some people. So we branded her company Paprika with the tagline "Spice Up Your Space." And it's visually evocative. It spice up your space. Says that she is not afraid of color. And Tejal Topawala does not say anything, but Paprika, Spice Up Your Space, speaks to both interior decorating or interior design and home staging.
That's awesome. I love that name too. Alexandra, can you talk about how you bring reluctant clients around to approving a great name?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a couple things. Take them through the smile and scratch test. It's a really easy, objective way to kill a name that they might like but you don't like. There's also, if you go to on the Barrett Kohler website, bkpub.com, if you dig around, there's a self-assessment test that's it's like a 30-question smile and scratch test, and you can print out the report and show that to the boss that, hey, that's not a good name. But to sell somebody on why a name is great, the main thing you want to do is just point out all the positives, remind people that to take their personal bias out of it, and a really good way to review names, I'll give you a few tips. One, do not ask yourself, do I like it? Because that's subjective. Ask, is it right for this brand? Is it on strategy, right? Is it right for this brand? Okay. Then don't ask random people, don't do the hallway test where you're asking other people what they think, or your friends. Do not do a survey monkey. I told my friend the other day, I said, do not do a survey monkey. She was naming her dog. I said, do not do a survey monkey. And she said, monkey, monkey, that's a great name. And she named her dog Monkey. So that's the only time that's worked. But don't do a survey monkey. When you ask somebody for what do you think of this name, that's not what they hear. What they hear is, what don't you like about this name? What do you think of this name is an invitation to criticize. What if Richard Branson had focus group the name Virgin, right? It never would have gotten off the ground. So trust yourself. Apple never tests names. Ad agencies like Wieden & Kennedy, they never test ads. Go with your gut. Make sure it clears the smile and scratch test, trademarking, and you know your brand better than anybody. Go with your gut.
Okay, those are great suggestions. So, Alexandra, here's a big issue that Susan is bringing to us. She wants to know, what do you suggest if you've had your company name for 17 years and it's known in the area but it fails the test, the smile test?
Well, 17 years is a lot of equity in your name, and my formula for figuring out, I don't know if there's a lot you can do about that, especially if you have a lot of repeat business. I would say, keep it, unless it's just terrible and it's very problematic for people to spell and pronounce and remember. Here's a good formula. how long have you been in business? How much longer will you be in business? If you've only been in business 2 years and you plan to be in business 20 years, change your name because you're going to have far more new customers than old customers. Changing your name has never been easier because now you can just announce it in social media. You have all of your previous customers' email addresses. It's a great reason to get back in touch with them. Tell them why you've changed your name. Maybe you've had a total brand refresh, or maybe you're offering new services now. So there's nothing wrong with doing it, but 17 years that's a lot of equity in your name.
Great, thanks. So here's a related question that came from Lindsay. What's the best way to transition a company from a name to a new name without losing recognition? And I think you kind of spoke to that, but maybe there are more ideas.
Well, I just did. I mean, I think that's it. Just explain to people why you did it. And if it makes sense, people will be on board with that.
Great. This question is coming from Kate. She wants to know how many names are good for a naming round. She does about 50 to 100, but it seems excessive.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, we come up with we come up with more than 100. We usually send our clients 100 names. But yeah, so look at the spoon me exercise. We just looked at one word and look at all those names I came up with. So you want to explore many, many words and go down many, many avenues. And don't stop just because you find a name that you like. Keep going. You know, do some diligence. Spend a few weeks on it.
Great. So here's a question from Mary. Alexandra, she's wondering, can she change her business name by doing business as, or must a person go through all the legal stuff if they're incorporated?
Yeah, that's a question for a trademark attorney. I don't know the answer to that.
No problem. So here's another question. These are coming in so fast. Alexandra, do you initially check availability of a name before presenting it to a client, or do you have this naming round with 100 names and then check the availability after?
After. So here's why. Because, again, domains don't matter. Sometimes we even present final names and forget to check the domain names because our clients get that. Like, we know there's over 252 million domain names, .com domain names that are taken. Nobody expects that they're going to get a great name and have the domain available, but we wait till after because if a client's coming through 100 names, we're not going to go check the domain availability of 100 names. We're going to let them pick their favorites from the list, and then we'll start checking. And if the domain isn't available, we'll come up with a phrase like the same wavelength.
Got it. That makes sense. So all the trademark availability comes after, correct? A follow-up question.
Domain name trademark availability. The reason that we don't knock out trademark names for trademarking in round one, because we usually do 2 rounds. So round one is a chance for people to react and really, we've already looked at the creative brief and gone off of that, but sometimes people don't know what they like till they see it, right? So they can react to that first round of names. Now, an example is we were naming a reverse mortgage product for Wells Fargo. One of the names on our list was Golden Ladder. Again, we don't screen any names before we show them to the client the first time. Golden Ladder, when we screened it, got killed in trademarking. However, we knew they really liked the word golden, so we did more name exploration around that name, and we came up with Golden Ladder. That cleared trademarking, and that became the name of the brand. Golden Bridge. So if Golden Ladder had been killed in the first round, we never would have gotten to Golden Bridge in the second round.
That makes sense. And so it wouldn't have made sense to search yet.
Yeah, and also it's searching 100 names, but yeah, there's some really, so we also, we came up with the name Copilot for something, and the client said, oh, I really like this idea of flying, explore more things around flying. But if Copilot had been killed, we never would have gotten to this explore things around flying. So the first list, we never kill anything.
Got it. Well, we are just about out of time. There are several more questions that have come in, so perhaps we can find a way to follow up with some answers to those questions in our follow-up email. We will be sending out a follow-up email with information about how you can rewatch this video on YouTube. Alexandra, is there anything else that you can share with the group about how they might be able to work with you or learn more from you in the future?
Sure. You can go to eatmywords.com if you want to work with us. There's under services, you can see our pricing packages. I also have something called Pick My Brain, which I recently started offering, and I'm doing a lot of these calls. It's you get an hour of my time. I spend 15 minutes reviewing all your material, then I take you online and we brainstorm together. Well, I'm really brainstorming, you're watching me and I'm getting your opinion, but I go to a lot more places than I just showed you, and I'm super fast, as you can imagine, after doing this for 10 years, and I just crank out a bunch of names in that time, and it's $1,000, and people have been really happy with it, and I've come up with a name for every single person I've done that for. So that is one way to work with me, especially if you're in a hurry.
That sounds like a really powerful offer, and I hope everyone will check out Alexandra's website at eatmywords.com. If you haven't already, I encourage you to buy a copy of her book, Hello, My Name is Awesome, or buy several for the people in your organization. We obviously just experienced a very powerful and wonderful hour with Alexandra, so thank you so much for spending this time with us and for allowing us to learn from you today.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks, everyone.